I'm about to show you why you're staring at your blood pressure monitor, celebrating a top number of 130, while completely ignoring the one hidden calculation that is actually predicting your next stroke. Why your doctor obsessing over bringing your systolic pressure down is actively blinding them to the biological hammer that is currently shattering the microscopic blood vessels inside your brain and kidneys. I'm about to expose the terrifying vascular physics of your pulse pressure. Why the gap between your top and bottom number is the ultimate, undeniable measurement of how rapidly your arteries are turning into stiff, calcified lead pipes. Why a reading of 150/70 is exponentially more dangerous than a reading of 150/90. Why taking a heavier dose of your blood pressure pill to force that top number down might be chemically starving your own heart muscle of oxygen and guaranteeing a heart attack. Stay with me. For decades, you have been conditioned to look at two numbers separated by a slash. You panic if the top number creeps into the 140s. You assume the bottom number doesn't really matter. You have been placed on heavier combinations of beta blockers and ACE inhibitors just to force those numbers into a textbook range on a digital screen. But your circulatory system is a dynamic, living network of plumbing. You are about to learn why treating a static top number instead of the physical flexibility of your aorta is leading to millions of unnecessary falls, fractured hips, and irreversible vascular dementia. Comment below if your doctor only ever talks to you about lowering your top number while completely ignoring how low your bottom number is crashing. Type pulse if you want to understand the exact biological protocol to find your true, healthy baseline. You're about to learn why the textbook standard is a deadly illusion and how to safely repair your vascular flexibility. And last month, I had a patient named Edward who was the victim of this exact physiological trap. Edward was 74 years old. His daughter brought him into my office because his memory had been slipping, he was profoundly fatigued, and he had fainted twice in the past month while simply standing up from the dinner table. His previous cardiologist was incredibly proud of his chart. They had successfully wrestled Edward's blood pressure down from 160/70 to a pristine 125/50 using a heavy dose of amlodipine and a diuretic. According to the chart, Edward was fixed. According to biology, Edward's cardiovascular system was suffocating. I told Edward and his daughter to throw the chart out. We carefully tapered down his dosages. We allowed his top number to naturally rise back up to 145, which allowed his bottom number to float back up to 75. Within 2 weeks, the dizzy spells completely vanished. His energy returned. His cognitive fog lifted, and he hasn't fainted since. Let me show you the precise cardiovascular physics of why his doctor's obsession with the top number nearly killed him, and the one mathematical calculation you must start paying attention to today. Your blood pressure reading gives you two distinct pieces of data. The top number, the systolic pressure, is the raw force of your blood when the heart actively squeezes. The bottom number, the diastolic pressure, is the residual pressure in your arteries when the heart rests between beats. Most patients and doctors stop there, but the true diagnostic goldmine lies in a third number, your pulse pressure. Pulse pressure is simply the mathematical difference between your top number and your bottom number. You subtract the diastolic from the systolic. If your blood pressure is perfectly textbook at 120/80, your pulse pressure is 40. A pulse pressure of 40 means your arteries are young, elastic, and functioning flawlessly. But what happens when you age and your blood pressure is 160/70? Most people just panic at the 160, but the true biological horror is the gap. 160 minus 70 equals a pulse pressure of 90. A widened pulse pressure, anything over 60, is a terrifying biological indicator. It tells us that your cardiovascular system has lost its shock absorbers. To understand this, we have to look at the physics of your aorta. The aorta is the massive central artery that exits directly out of your heart. When you're 25 years old, your aorta is incredibly flexible. It acts exactly like a heavy-duty rubber balloon. When your heart violently squeezes and shoots a wave of blood out, that healthy, flexible aorta balloons outward to absorb the shock. By ballooning outward, it perfectly cushions the blow, keeping the top number relatively low. Then, as the heart rests, the aorta elastically snaps back to its original shape, smoothly pushing the blood forward and keeping the bottom number stable and high. But as you age, the biology of your blood vessels fundamentally changes. Over decades of poor diet, chronic inflammation, and oxidative stress, your aorta undergoes microscopic calcification. The collagen fibers inside the arterial wall become cross-linked and hardened. Your aorta turns from a flexible rubber balloon into a rigid, calcified steel pipe. When your aorta turns into a steel pipe, the physics of your heartbeat become catastrophic. Your heart squeezes and shoots that violent wave of blood into the aorta. But the aorta cannot balloon outward anymore. The shock wave hits a concrete wall. Because there is top zero flexibility to absorb the force, the pressure inside the pipe explodes upward. Your number skyrockets to 160, 170, or 180. Then, during the resting phase, the true danger reveals itself. Because the aorta never expanded, it cannot elastically snap back. There is no sustained push to keep the blood moving forward. The pressure inside the pipe completely collapses. Your bottom number crashes down to 65, 60, or even 50. You are left with a massive, widened pulse pressure. Your top number is sky high, and your bottom number is dangerously low. When you have a wide pulse pressure, every single heartbeat becomes a violent, physical hammer. Your body is not designed to handle this kind of pounding. Your internal organs, specifically your brain and your kidneys, are low-resistance capillary networks. They require a smooth, continuous, gentle flow of blood to survive. When your aorta loses its shock-absorbing capability, that smooth flow is replaced by a pulsating, violent jackhammer. With every beat of your heart, a concussive shock wave is sent crashing directly into the fragile filtration vessels of your kidneys. The delicate nephrons are physically battered and scarred. Over time, your kidney function steadily declines, and your doctor blames it on aging. It is not aging. It is mechanical trauma. The damage to your brain is even more sinister. The microscopic capillaries feeding your neurological tissue are violently stretched by the massive systolic spike, and then immediately starved of blood during the collapsing diastolic drop. This relentless pounding causes microscopic tears in the brain's white matter. These are tiny, silent microhemorrhages. Over the years, these microstrokes accumulate. This is the primary driver of vascular dementia. Your memory fades, your balance falters, and you lose your cognitive independence because your brain is being physically beaten to death by your own pulse. But the absolute worst thing you can do when you have a wide pulse pressure is to blindly swallow more generic blood pressure pills to force the top number down. This brings us to the diastolic J-curve, the exact trap that nearly killed Edward. The heart is an incredible organ, but it has a massive engineering challenge. It has to feed itself. The heart muscle requires a constant supply of highly oxygenated blood through the coronary arteries. But here is the critical physics constraint. The heart cannot feed itself while it is actively squeezing. The physical pressure of the contraction pinches the coronary arteries shut. The heart can only fill its own coronary arteries with blood during the resting phase. During diastole, this means your heart muscle is entirely dependent on your bottom number, your diastolic blood pressure, to feed itself. If your diastolic pressure drops too low, the blood simply does not have enough hydrostatic force to push into the coronary arteries. If your blood pressure is 160/70, you have a stiff aorta. Your doctor panics over the 160 and prescribes a heavy dose of amlodipine. The medication forces your arteries to chemically relax, and it successfully drops your top number down to 130. Your doctor is thrilled, but amlodipine doesn't just lower the top number. It drags the bottom number down with it. That 70 drops to a 40. Your blood pressure is now 130/40. You enter the starvation zone of the J-curve. The pressure during the resting phase is now so profoundly low that your coronary arteries run completely dry. Your heart muscle is starved of oxygen. Massive, peer-reviewed clinical trials have repeatedly shown that if you push diastolic blood pressure below 60 in older adults, the rate of heart attacks, heart failure, and cardiovascular death actually skyrockets. You cannot blindly chase a top number of 120 if it means dragging your bottom number into the starvation zone. If your pulse pressure is wide, you do not need more volume-reducing pills. You have a profound structural problem with arterial calcification and collagen cross-linking. You must aggressively target the physical flexibility of your aorta. Here is the exact, hardcore biological protocol to pull the calcium out of your arteries, rebuild your vascular elasticity, and close the deadly pulse pressure gap. First, we must physically remove the concrete from your arterial walls. You have to decalcify the aorta. You cannot do this by eating less salt. You do this with vitamin K2, specifically the negative 7 Malawian Quatches form. When your arteries become stiff and rigid, it is because your body has inappropriately deposited calcium into the soft vascular tissue instead of your bones. Vitamin K2 is the only biological molecule in the human body capable of activating a specific protein called matrix GLA protein, or MGP. When vitamin K2 activates MGP, it acts like a microscopic biological claw. It physically rips the misplaced calcium out of your soft arterial tissue, binds to it, and shuttles it safely into your skeletal system where it belongs. As the calcium is pulled out of the aorta wall over several months, the pipe slowly regains its youthful flexibility. It can balloon outward again. The shock absorber is restored. The systolic spike drops, and the diastolic collapse is prevented. You need 100 to 200 micrograms of vitamin K2, negative 7 Malawian Quatches, every single day, taken with a meal containing healthy fats for absorption. Second, you must stop the chemical cross-linking that is turning your collagen into hard plastic. The structural integrity of your aorta relies on collagen and elastin fibers sliding smoothly over one another. But when you wake up and eat a massive bowl of oatmeal, a bagel, or a glass of orange juice, your blood sugar spikes violently. This glycemic tsunami is devastating to your vascular flexibility. The excess glucose molecules physically bump into the collagen fibers lining your aorta. A chemical reaction occurs. The sugar permanently binds to the protein, cross-linking and hardening it. This creates toxic compounds known as advanced glycation end products, or AGEs. Think of glycation like caramelizing onions in a pan. The sugar turns brown, sticky, and hard. This is exactly what is happening to the internal structure of your aorta. The AGEs accumulate, the vessel walls stiffen, and the pulse pressure widens. You must flatten your morning glucose curve. Starting tomorrow, your breakfast must contain 0 naked carbohydrates. It must be built entirely on high bioavailability protein and healthy fats. Eggs cooked in butter, leftover steak, or half an avocado. When you eat protein and fat first thing in the morning, your blood sugar remains flat. Your insulin stays quiet. The glycation process completely halts, and your body can finally begin breaking down the caramelized proteins in your vascular walls. Third, you must forcefully dilate the vascular tree using mechanical tension. When your aorta is stiff, your entire cardiovascular system operates under extreme resistance. You need to flood your bloodstream with nitric oxide to force this smooth muscle in your arteries to relax and expand. As we covered in previous protocols, the fastest way to generate a massive systemic wave of nitric oxide is the isometric towel squeeze. Take a hand towel, roll it up tightly, and squeeze in one hand as hard as you possibly can. Do not let go. Hold that maximum crushing grip for exactly 2 minutes. You're physically crushing the arteries in your arm, trapping the blood, and throwing the tissue into an oxygen panic. The endothelial cells lining your blood vessels frantically load up their nitric oxide reserves. At exactly 2 minutes, you release your grip. A violent rush of fresh blood explodes into your forearm. This reactive hyperemia physically scours the arterial walls and triggers the endothelial cells to dump their entire payload of nitric oxide directly into your central circulation. This gas diffuses into the stiff, contracted arteries throughout your entire body, forcing the calcium out of the smooth muscle cells and paralyzing the vessel into a state of deep relaxation. Do this twice a day to drastically lower the resistance your heart is pumping against. Fourth, you must provide the internal cellular engine with the fuel it needs to keep those arteries relaxed overnight. You need 400 milligrams of chelated magnesium every evening before bed. Magnesium acts as the biological counterbalance to calcium inside the smooth muscle cell. When you're deficient in magnesium, which the vast majority of seniors are, calcium floods the cell, locking the artery into a continuous, rigid spasm. Swallowing a cheap drugstore magnesium oxide pill is useless. It is basically crushed rocks and will only give you diarrhea. You must use magnesium glycinate or magnesium taurate. These amino acid-bound forms bypass the digestive blockade, absorb deeply into your bloodstream, and penetrate directly into your vascular tissue. They hyperpolarize the cell membrane, forcing the calcium back out of the smooth muscle and allowing the artery to physically relax while you sleep. Do not let a physician treat you like a static top number on a piece of paper. You're a dynamic biological organism. A wide pulse pressure is your body screaming that the pipes are turning to stone. I have compiled a comprehensive digital guide that perfectly outlines this entire biological protocol. It includes the exact vitamin K2 and magnesium dosing schedules, the specific zero-carbohydrate breakfast templates to halt vascular caramelization, and the exact script you need to have a calm, data-driven conversation with your physician about adjusting your medications if your diastolic pressure is dropping dangerously low. The link to download this life-saving guide is in the description directly below this video. I'm going to expose the hidden dietary mineral that acts as the ultimate biological fluid drainer for your swollen ankles, and why the standard medical advice to simply eat less salt completely ignores this critical biological exchange rate in part 2 of this series. Make sure you click the link in the description to subscribe to my new secondary channel where that video will be posted, and grab the digital guide while you're there. Your blood pressure is not a score to be beaten into submission. It is the physical life force keeping your brain oxygenated and your heart fed. Stop chasing a dangerous illusion. Calculate your pulse pressure, repair your vascular flexibility, and take control of your biology. I'll see you in the next video. Thank you for watching.